Welcome to part 4 of Walking Tall. And just a reminder of what we learned from Joseph and how he walked tall. According to Joseph, walking tall is being an agent ushering the blessings and success on others. He became a blessing as a slave to Potiphar, the master of the house. He became an instrument of success to the jailer and his fellow inmates. And later on, he became an agent of change, or rather a deliverer for Pharaoh and his kingdom. And finally, he became a lifesaver for his family members. Now, just a quick note for the people who are in the ministry. We learned some lessons from Joseph. Now, you may personally feel you're not receiving any blessing after all that you've done to others. But I want to encourage you to press on, because God, in His time and His season, will reward what is due to you. Amen. So the next person we're going to look at today, and to learn something from the way he walked with God, is from the life of Moses. How he walked tall with the Lord has some important lessons and life's principles for our application. And this time I'm going to stick with the few verses mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, beginning with verse 23 through 28. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God, rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. May the Lord bless the reading of His word. Now, according to verse 23, God had a definite plan for the life of Moses. And I believe his parents had some insight to it, and hence they dared to defy the king's edict. The story of his childhood, as mentioned in the book of Genesis, shows that his mother had a great influence upon his life, because he grew up as the son of the daughter of Pharaoh in the palace, but taken care and tutored by his own mother, who worked as a nurse on behalf of Pharaoh's daughter. But verse 24 is where we see how he walked tall. Let's see verse 24 first. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. There are 5 lessons we can learn from him regarding walking tall with God. Number 1, walking tall, according to Moses, is walking out of your comfort zone. Moses was raised as a child of Pharaoh's daughter, tutored, educated, even cultured to a lifestyle of the Egyptians, and especially as a would-be royal person. he moved out of that comfort zone, from that place of honor and a secured future. And the reason that he could do that was because of one thing. He knew his roots and his true identity. Come and think about it. Come and think of it. Moses has, you can say most of his life as a young man grew up in the environment of the Egyptians. He was educated with the education of the Egyptians. He has been trained and even cultured and prepared that one day he will ascend the throne of his grandfather. But I believe his real mother, who took care of him as a child, had infused and implanted upon him some of the unchangeable truths. To the point that when he grew up, he never forgot who he really was. That's why he was quick to even identify with his very own people who were at that time treated as slaves. So here we have Moses with the choice of ignoring and denying his true identity so that he could go on in life and enjoy the status, the benefits, and the respect and honor awaiting him in the kingdom of Egypt. But thank the Lord that Moses grew with that strong belief of who he really was and his true identity. So he did not want to fake life. He didn't want to take the easy way. But he saw everything from another perspective. Somebody said, rather this is one of the famous psychologists in the world, he said, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Moses looked at the reality of life. He knew who he was. And he valued or treasured that true identity that he was willing to walk out of his comfort zone. So Moses grew up with a greater purpose than just the throne of Egypt. Thomas Carlyle said these words, "A person with a clear purpose will make progress on even the roughest road. A person with no purpose will make no progress on even the smoothest road." Moses and his attitude about life in comparison with the one in the palace and the one outside with his very kinsmen took the risk of leaving the comfort zone. Somebody said, your attitude plus your choices equals your life. Or you can let things define you, destroy you, or strengthen you. It's your choice. Moses made that choice of leaving or walking out of his comfort zone. Second point, walking tall is walking out of temporal pleasures into something higher and lasting through a painful path. Let me repeat. Walking tall is walking out of temporal pleasures into something higher and lasting through a painful path. Let me remind you of the scripture again. It says, he chose to be mistreated, verse 25. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. have enjoyed life. The way he ate, the way he slept, or the way he walked, the way he talked, and the way he related with people, he could have enjoyed life because he belonged to the royal family. And there's so much of everything in abundance. His is for the asking. And he could have enjoyed everything that he wanted. He could have gotten everything that his eyes saw. But because of the true identity, because he knew his God, if you will, because he knew who he was able to walk out of the temporal pleasures, looking for that higher and lasting lifestyle. But that didn't come easy to him. He had to go through a lot of pain. Look at what it says again. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of great value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger, because he saw him he persevered, because he saw him who is invisible. Number 3, walking tall is to be able to distinguish between short-term gains and long-term rewards. Let me repeat. Walking tall is to be able to distinguish between short-term goals, short-term gains, and long-term rewards. You know, the choices we make have a major impact on the life we live. With Moses, he had to go through hard times. But he was so ready to leave the temporal or the short-term gains in order to be able to reach out to the long-term rewards. Somebody said, choices are the hinges of destiny. It was not just fate, but destiny in the life of Moses made him or enabled him to distinguish, to differentiate, and to even make a choice whether to go for short-term gains or to reach out for long-term rewards. This one writer says, destiny is no matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. It is not a thing to be waited for. It is a thing to be achieved. That's what those verses said we've just read. He was looking for his reward. He didn't look at the future benefits awaiting him at the throne in the palace to be his rewards. But he was looking to something invisible. Which takes me or brings me to the 4th point. Walking tall is discerning the visible and the invisible. Most of us are caught up in life by the things that we see, the things that we can touch, and the things that we feel. But the fact of the matter is that human life consists not only of the visible but also of the invisible. We only talk about the physical life. We rarely talk about the spiritual life. And even when we talk about spiritual life, it's just at one level only. That is in the form of rites and rituals that we perform maybe occasionally or once a week. But the spiritual life is just as real as the physical life 24/7. And Moses was able to distinguish. Somebody said these words, don't make a permanent decision for your temporary emotion. And then Rick Warren also said these words, eternal values, not temporal ones, should become the deciding factors for your decisions. When Moses compared, or when Moses faced the reality of the visible and the reality of the invisible, and as he weighed them, he was able to make the conclusion that the invisible is more real than the visible. One of the famous writers said these words. In fact, it was John MacArthur. He said, we don't seek to escape this life by dreaming of heaven, but we do find we can endure this life because of the certainty of heaven. Heaven is eternal, earth is temporal. Those who fix all their affections and feelings, things on the fleeting things of this world, are the real escapists, because they are vainly attempting to avoid facing eternity by hiding in the fleeting shadows of things that are only transient. Moses gave us a great lesson. Imagine he was living in a palace as a prince, having all the benefits and enjoying all the pleasures of life. But as he weighed life from a perspective of the invisible, he was able to make that choice. That he's going to walk away from what he can feel and touch, and to walk into the things that can be felt only in the Spirit. The last thing I want to share here about walking tall. Walking tall is taking guard of others from incoming dangers. Allow me to read the other verses. I'll just join together 27 and 28. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Now remember, he didn't plan to leave, as a matter of saying. He was just helping his fellow kinsmen who were slaves at that point of time. He saw some Egyptian taskmaster beating and abusing this Hebrew slave. Moses looked for an opportunity, and as he looked right and left, he saw no one to witness what will happen. He killed the Egyptian and buried him inside on the ground. But the next day, two Hebrews were fighting, and he went to pacify the quarrel. But the words they said to him concerning what he did yesterday made him realize that it was no secret that he killed the Egyptian soldier or taskmaster. And so because of that, he was afraid of the king. He had to leave. He fled Egypt. And so, as he ran from there, and he only became a shepherd later on in his father's household. And during those years of shepherding, he met God. And when he met God, it changed everything in his life. Now he was able to really understand there is the reality of the invisible. And therefore, man who was able to distinguish the visible from the invisible. But verse 28 says these words. By faith, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. Now this verse is after he has returned back with the commission from God to deliver the children of Israel. And as you read the book of Exodus, you will see that he came back, he returned back to Egypt with this word of God in his mouth and in his heart, that Pharaoh should let his people go, God's people go. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't instantaneous. He had to really fight with Pharaoh. He performed 10 miraculous signs and wonders. And that is ultimately Pharaoh surrendered, because the final disaster that happened was when the angel of death struck Egypt. When all the firstborn, from man to beast, died, that's when Pharaoh finally decided to let go of the Hebrews, of the Hebrew children. And just before that night, God instructed Moses that all the people in the camp, the Israelite camp, all the children of the Hebrews, should sacrifice a 1-year-old lamb without blemish, and to dip its blood and sprinkle it on the doorpost, and that they should eat the meat and be ready and eat it with haste, because that was the night of their deliverance. And that night, when the angel of death struck all the firstborn in Egypt, but the Hebrews were protected, then he was able to lead them out of Egypt. So it says here, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. So walking tall is also taking guard of others from incoming dangers. There's another writer who says these words, and I quote, "Life is inherently risky. There's only one big risk you should avoid at all costs, and that is the risk of doing nothing." Moses took the risk right from the start when he left Egypt. And when he came back, he also took the risk of standing before Pharaoh and demanding the freedom and liberty of the children of the Hebrew slaves. But thankfully, he was willing to take that risk. And because he took the risk, he was able to rescue many others from or out of danger. Ever since he made the choice, Moses' life was always at risk. Or rather, he took risks. He risked to save a Hebrew slave. He risked his own safety, his own security, his own dignity. He risked, when he came back, to face Pharaoh. He took a risk in every way. And at this point of the verse that we've read, there was a danger coming, the impending danger on that night in Egypt. Danger was the angel of death striking every firstborn man and animal. But Moses, believing God, he took the risk. Firstly, asking all the Israelites, according to their families, to take a 1-year-old lamb, slaughter it, and take the blood, dip a hyssop, and sprinkle the doorposts of their houses. And to eat the meat, eat it with haste, preparing, because that was the night of their deliverance. He took that risk of asking them to do something they're not used to. He took the risk, believing that that night will be the night of deliverance. And he had to take many risks as he left Egypt with the people. Read the story of Moses, and I can say that his life was full of risks. Because when he left Egypt, and for 40 years with the children of Israel, they journeyed through the wilderness, and there were so many occasions of risk-taking. He was willing, and by taking those risks, he was able to protect them from danger. He was able to protect them from harm, because he had to lead and lead on forward. He was willing to take that walk that God had called upon his life, and walking tall with him. So what are the lessons we learned from Moses? Let me ask you a few questions here. When we think about Moses and what he did in the very first place, let's ask ourselves the questions. Where are our roots? Do you really know who you are? What's your identity? Is it your status? Is it your possession? Or is it your position in the society? Where is the security of your identity? And by that I mean to ask, where is God and Jesus Christ in the scheme of things of your life? Where is God in your thought life? Where is God in your actions? Now, there are a few things that we should keep in mind as we look at Moses' life. Let me give you 4 things here, quickly. Number 1, know where you stand, and ascertain that where you stand is the right foundation. There's a famous song that says, "On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand." My friends, if you try to base your foundation on the wisdom that you have, the philosophies of this world, the wealth, the honor, or the prestige that you enjoy in society, if those are the things that you base your life upon, they're all sinking sand. So know where you stand, and I would invite you to stand strong in Jesus Christ. Because he says, "I have come to give you life." Stand strong in him. Know that he is the solid rock of your foundation. Secondly, choose long-term gains and set aside temporary pleasures and relief. Don't look for shortcuts. Be willing to pay the price. But if you have long-term goals, hold on, because they will bring long-term gains. Thirdly, learn to live with the reality of the invisible. Some people, they think the invisible is something that is not worth discussing, or it's something that we can just discuss occasionally in the form of religion and the religious discussions, or in the form of performing rites and rituals and ceremonies. But as you watch Moses, or learn from Moses, he sees the invisible to be so real. You know, to some people, the invisible is something, we tend to think about it as something only of the spirit that we can take care of maybe just once a week or occasionally. But no, the invisible is just as real as the visible 24/7. The last lesson we see here that we can learn from Moses is that when in crisis and in dangers, be a person ready to help others, not run for cover. Always put others before self. We've looked at all the people in the past, in these past few weeks of our study. All of them who walked tall with God were people who always put others first. Others comes before self. Now, as I conclude, what we value and consider important will shape us accordingly. What do you consider to be valuable to you? What do you consider to be important? Those things will shape you. Let's learn from Moses. He saw the wealth, he saw the fame, he saw the fortune, he saw the glory, he saw the honor that he would have inherited. But he did not place his value there. The throne of Egypt was not that important to him. Paul said these words, I have determined to know nothing else but Christ and Him crucified. My dear friends, I hope that as we go through the pandemic, it's not just about something that just happened by chance and that one day everything will change back to normal. We have to make a strong decision. That is to walk tall no matter what comes next. Things might turn and shape in ways we've never thought them to be. But if we walk tall with God, we gain courage, we gain confidence, and more importantly, we gain relationship with Him. Because life in Him is really real and more real than life in the world. May the Lord bless each one of us. And may we continue to walk at such a time. Walk tall with God. Be serious with the call that He has given you. And if you have not heard, let me tell you, He has a call for each one of you. But if you say, I've never heard that call, spend some time. Spend some time alone with God until you understand that the call has already been there since the beginning of time. May God richly bless you.